Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tarda Zone. This is Friday Night Contact, and we are here again tonight to bring you all the weekly news. And of course, we have our regular host in Lee. So, welcome, Lee.
Hello.
And of course, you might notice that Chris is not here tonight, and we have a very special guest host with us tonight, the Little Platoon. So I want you all to welcome Little Platoon to the channel. Nice to have you on board.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely great. Lee set this up. So, Lee, again, well done. Fair dues to you. We were stuck for someone, and the Little Platoon says, yeah, I'll be up for it. So, it's nice to have you on board, I have to say. We've got a couple of people in the chat, and then we'll tell you what we're going to talk about. Well, it's kind of scrolling across the screen there, but we'll have other stuff to talk about as well. Don't worry, that won't be all of it, but we will have a very interesting conversation tonight. So we've got I'm going to be crap at these names tonight. Okay. This is bad. This is bad.
You'll get through it. You'll get through it.
Zagros Oskan is in the chat. I don't know if I've got your name right, but I do apologize. Just want to tell you I have a bit of a problem with certain words, so my speech is not. So you will get to know. You will see what I'm all about. Mr. Brown Alliance is in the chat as well. Welcome. Nice to have you on board. We got Leland in the chat. We got Garbage in the chat. We've got the Mecharanon
The
in the chat.
Mecranon.
Yes. You are doing this on purpose. We've got Melvin. Fun. We've got Melvin in the chat as well. I was going to give Lee a shout out, but he's not getting one now.
I'll sod off.
And we got Scott. Fuck off you. We got Scottish Stavros and friends wrestle with pop culture. I thought you were watching the wrestling tonight. I know the Royal Rumble's on tomorrow, but people are still into wrestling. And yeah, it's not my thing anymore. But anyway, let's get into what we have to talk about. So as you can see there, it looks like Alec Baldwin is different to the rest of us because, you know, we're charged with a crime. We don't get to continue with our lives. But it seems that Alec Baldwin is, and Rust apparently is going to go back into production very soon. Now, I think myself and Chris and Lee gave our opinions on the whole situation. Oh, no, Lee wasn't here. Sorry. Lee was sick last week, so Lee can give his opinion this week on it. But myself and Chris gave our opinion on it, and, you know, there was negligence on his behalf, but there were also other people involved as well. He was talking, Chris brought up about the fact that the person that they hired, and remember, Alec Baldwin was producer on this movie as well, so he would have been responsible and part of the process of hiring people. And apparently, the prop person that they hired didn't have the necessary qualifications to be actually on a movie set. So we spoke about that. But lads, I want to ask you guys, is it right that Alec Baldwin should be continuing to make this movie, considering there were deaths involved? Because to me, it seems rather disrespectful to the family of the person that passed away. What do you guys think about that?
After you.
Well, I think it's quite clear that as he's not only starring in it, but also executive producer, he, the buck stops with him. Now, obviously, what happened was a tragedy. It's something he has to live with for the rest of his life. I don't believe for a second it was intentional. but the fact still remains that someone has died. Someone was also quite badly injured.
Yeah.
Which I think the director of photography, wasn't it? Or the director, I can't remember. It does seem very strange. I mean, his entire attitudes since the event happened has been one that has confused an awful lot of people. He has presented himself as the victim throughout all of this. It's always been a very sort of bad optics with him since the tragic event happened, and he every time he seems to open his mouth or does anything really in regards to his career or what happened, he's been very confrontational. I think there's a lot of bad choices that he's made. I think the bad choices started when he hired his crew, which he did clearly on the cheap to save himself $1 or $3. This has culminated in hiring someone who was absolutely not qualified to do what she was doing. The fact that there were people who should have been on set who deal with arms, who know exactly what they're doing. Now, I've worked on film sets before, been on film sets with weapons and things like guns and things like that. And the level of detail and care that goes into weapons, even if they're fake weapons. And I have to really reiterate how important this is, that even a gun that's made of wood or plastic that has no live ammunition is treated like a real gun. You're not allowed to leave it anywhere. You're not supposed to put it down anywhere. You're supposed to carry it around with you wherever you are. You're never to point it at anybody. You're not supposed to, hand it to anybody, anything like that, even if it is a completely fake prop. The fact that this was a weapon that had a live round in it is unimaginable that could even happen on a proper film set. Clearly, having someone who was a young lady who was very inexperienced, may have perhaps even lied about the experience that she had. The checks simply don't seem to have been made. Now that is on him. There is no one else higher than him, really, that can take the blame. Obviously, her incompetence is on her, but he is the one who must accept responsibility. Now, the fact that the film is still going ahead, again, I think that's another example of his complete misreading of the situation. He has put himself in a position where morally, I think, let alone legally, I just don't understand how you can still move forward with it. I mean, the insurance on that on that film set must be phenomenal. The fact that he's facing charges and still going ahead with it, you look at people who've done a lot worse than him, like who may have done terrible things, but not killed anyone, who have gone to jail. So for less than manslaughter or murder.
But you brought up about you've brought up a very interesting thing. You brought up about the way he's been acting and behaving. Well, right after the shooting, he did an interview. Right, let's not forget that he actually did an interview and then tried to dispute the fact that he didn't press the trigger, and then that was debunked. And now he's made somewhat a decision where I'm raising me up. Why would you continue with this movie after all of this happened? Now, I think you see a comment in the chat saying, well, why should all the other people lose their livelihoods? I think we've gone past that. Someone died on the movie set because people that were in charge.
Sue him for loss of earnings. I mean,
there's a couple of little bits. I mean, in the first place, you guys probably know far more about this than I do. As a general rule, I'm not in favor of taking action before prosecution. The charges have been made against him. Fine. Wait until the case is tried. Then you can revisit the situation if he is in fact found guilty of manslaughter or something worse. everything changes. But
Yeah.
then the facts have been properly established, it's been through a court of law, and the debate effectively ceases at that stage as to whether or not he should remain involved with the film. I don't like it. We see it in a number of other contexts where charges are made against people and immediately guilt is presumed and the person loses their job. Everyone associated with them loses their job. It might well be accurate to do that, to make that assumption in this case. I think this is one of the more open and shut cases from what I've seen of it, but I still don't, as a general rule, like the preempting of justice.
I do agree with you on that, but then there was a video released where you actually see them messing with guns on set. Like, they're literally shooting guns. And
Yeah, no, I'm
messing
sure
with
they
the
are. I mean,
guns.
I don't
So
think
there
anyone's
is
disputing.
negligence there. Now, you are right. Of course, he's only being charged. He has to be found guilty. But I just don't know. I get where you're coming from. But if I did something like that, I don't know if I could, because the type of person I am, maybe that's the difference. He's just a different breed and he can move on from it and continue to make that movie. But if I had killed someone, whether it was an accident or not, right? Say it was an accident, right? We'll say it was an accident. It was an accident. I couldn't continue with that movie. I couldn't live with myself.
That's
I
fair
would
enough, but
have.
it's
I would
also...
have. Go on. Sorry, carry on.
Well, I was gonna, no, I mean, I would agree with that. But again, that's a separate matter to the legal one. That's a question of one's moral character. I don't think people tend to make it to the top of Hollywood by being morally upstanding, honest people who do the right thing. I think if that were the case, he wouldn't be in this position to begin with.
You're right.
There's the other problem is that I think from his perspective, I mean, he probably is a completely selfish shit. I mean, he's Alec Baldwin. Everything we've seen of him, he's not a particularly pleasant human being, I don't think.
He doesn't come across, but we can't judge him on the fact that he's an asshole.
No.
That's what we were saying last week as well to everybody. Like, we all know he is an asshole, but we have to just judge him on the evidence that's presented, and not judge him on his character.
No, exactly. I think the arsehole thing only comes into it insofar as he presumably took this job in the full knowledge of what his responsibilities were supposed to be. But the guy is an actor first and foremost, and he's I think has he done some directing work even, but he's a producer very much second. I mean, that's not what he's best known for. As an actor, you can reasonably expect to turn up on a film set and expect that if somebody is handing you a prop, that prop has been through all of the checks. You're just there to handle it. You're not there to run the checks or hire the people who run the checks on the props that you're using. As an actor, that's his experience being brought up in the film industry.
Yeah, but as
an executive producer,
actor,
that's very different, isn't it? As an executive producer, you are very much more responsible. You are at the top.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's a very easy transition to make. If he's just gone into this executive producing role because he thinks it looks good on his sort of
CV.
honor sheet, then he might actually end up needing a CV after this job. But, but if he's just gone into it because he thinks, well, it looks good for me to have the executive producer credit, I don't necessarily think he'll have been very aware or even caring very much about the actual responsibilities that come with that role, like hiring and firing qualified people. Yeah. That's where sort of the arsehole selfishness comes into it, in the sense that I just don't think he cared.
Yeah.
But I think as well the optics are not good, and I think that he would have been better off. I agree with what you're saying. You can't presume someone's guilt before it's gone through due process, but at the same time, is it too much to ask? Perhaps maybe putting this on ice until after the trial, so we know what's going. I think this is rather a cynical move to try and maybe claw back some money that he's going to clearly need when this all comes crashing around his ears. But I just don't see any sort of moral justification.
Yeah.
I mean, I
don't know. I mean, they continued with, was it The Crow, who, what's his name? Lee, something like
Brandon Lee. Yeah, absolutely right. They did actually continue with that movie after he was shot. Yeah. It has happened. You are right. It is an interesting one, and I can see that some people in the chat obviously have very strong feelings about the movie still going ahead. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that the movie shouldn't, but I just morally, I just don't know. Maybe he's just built differently. But I don't think, personally, most in the chat, were really being honest with yourselves. You just couldn't carry on with the movie. Come on.
I think the Crow went ahead with the permission of the estate. I think because wasn't it Brandon's brother did the body, did the action things, but filling in as a body double for him. So I think it would maybe, if there was some sort of agreement with the estate of those who were affected, agree to it. I don't know what their stance is in regards to it moving forwards. That would be interesting. I mean, if we're in full complement of the facts, that might help us to decide whether or not this is particularly a good idea or not. But I do find the timing a bit weird, and I just don't think that this is probably the right time to try and make a movie, particularly with Alec Baldwin. How are you going to tie in the sales pitch for this film when it comes out, starring Alec Baldwin, the guy who killed the
would anybody have really been that interested in the film if this hadn't happened? It actually might end up driving up interest in the film because now people have heard of Rust. I'm not recommending this approach for other film studios looking to get more social media power.
No, but you are right. It does. Even negative press is gonna have a positive effect on the movie. That's the weird thing about it. You're absolutely spot on. People will be now. People have actually, they've probably Googled Rust and Alec Baldwin, and they, as you said, probably would never have heard of this movie if this incident had never have happened. It probably would have been one of those movies that probably would have went straight to Blu-ray or something.
Well, look at Velma.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that because I know the little platoon's a bit of an expert on Velma.
I mean, she's killed her.
But we'll go into that in a minute.
Career, and she's killed her career and still managed to make the most unpopular TV show in the history of the universe extremely successful. I mean,
we'll get these two little topics out of the way, right? So Jesus Christ Superstar is going all female and non-binary, but the creator, Tim Rice, isn't it? That who it is? Tim Rice has said that if they stick to the dialogue, though, he'll have no problem with it. But he doesn't understand that there will be a problem because they're non-binary. They use pronouns, and it's going to run into some difficulty. And guess what country in the UK is delighting us with this nonsense? Yes, I'm sorry to say, Scottish Stavros and friends wrestle with pop culture, but your country has become the woke toilet pot central of the UK all of a sudden. I don't know why, but there you go. Yes, Scotland is going to delight us with this version of Jesus Christ Superstar. Judas will be a woman, Jesus will be a woman, and they'll be all non-binary. But
non-binary.
Tim Rice, Tim does not understand that what non-binary means, and
how do you sing lyrics? How do you sing? I don't know how to love him. Is it I don't know how to love them? She, her.
That's what I mean. So I don't think the creator, I don't think the writer himself kind of understands what's going to happen here. He thinks they're going to stick to the dialogue, but they won't be able to, because if that production does stick to the dialogue, right, you know what's going to happen. The radical left, the wokey side, are going to say, how dare you say this is non-binary and it's not non-binary? Why you... They'll be given all of this rubbish. So they're setting themselves up for failure. But poor Scotland. Poor Scotland. I mean, Jesus Christ.
I mean,
sorry. Superstar.
Jesus wasn't, he wasn't binary, was he? I mean, Jesus was sort of more of a trinity. But I don't think you can have non-trinity as a... I'm reaching here, but it's
just getting ridiculous now, man. Do you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and identify as a fucking two-spirited penguin. There you go. Fuck off. And the start, man. It's getting ridiculous, man. It's getting ridiculous. And here's another ridiculous thing. It doesn't tie in, but this just goes to show you how ridiculous we actually have gotten. Do you remember I made a joke last week about Snickers bars? And I said they'll probably change that name because it kind of sounds like a different name. And they'll probably change the name of Snickers bar. Well, they haven't changed the name of Snickers bar, but you know what they have done? It's not the way when you open it up, it looks like it looks like veins on a penis. Well, they've removed the veins from the chocolate bar because it looks like a man's. Yeah. Yeah, so they've actually removed the veins from the Snickers bar. I told you, folks, this is how crazy it is. And M&M's, right, another chocolate company, bunch of feckin' assholes, have decided to get rid of the M&M people, the little characters, and I love them growing up. I've known them ever since I was a kid, man. We've had them. That's how long they're gone, right? And now they've decided, well, I'll show you the post. This is the one thing I can actually throw up, so just bear with me. But M&M's has lost the plot. They've got a new spokeswoman. Yes, a spokeswoman now, instead of the characters, to tell us how much we're evil, bigoted, racist bastards. You know, the usual
Didn't
crap.
they get didn't they get rid of the one of the M&M characters?
They did originally, but that wasn't good enough.
And then they replaced it with sneakers, and then made it look like she's a lesbian M&M.
Yeah, and now they've decided to do away with them all now because, you know, the wokey crowd apparently are upset. I mean, I don't know how M&M's, I don't know how chocolate and chocolate offend people nowadays. You know what? We ought to be fucking worried that, well, if we're not already worried, you should be. Society is gone. It's gone. If people are fucking
let's be clear,
getting upset over M&M's.
No, let's be clear. No one is offended by these cartoon characters. It's a bunch of people on Twitter who pretend to be offended because they just want to control absolutely everything. And these corporations are absolute suckers for public opinion. And they take Twitter as gospel. I just don't understand it. It's
a Stalinist impulse. It's a recreation
really
of the old Stalinist impulse. You're giving people who perceive themselves to be relatively powerless and in the minority, you've given them complete control over the terms of reference in debate, in argument, in language, and a way of policing and fundamentally, and most importantly, condemning people without trial and without evidence, based on whatever transgression against the modern language fad happens to be. You've given idiots an immense amount of power and no accountability. That happens periodically throughout history. I always call these people Stalinists now because their attempts at cancellation are actually, well, mix of Stalin and Mao, maybe. But I miss the good old days of, a few months ago when the only confectionery company that was doing this kind of stuff was Ben & Jerry's, and we had to be lectured to on foreign policy by ice cream. But now it's everyone.
I'll give Ben & Jerry's something. Ben & Jerry set up their model originally like that from the beginning, right? So whether you think they're pandering or not, they've always done that, right? The difference is you got M&M's, and then you probably have all of these Mars coming out with some stupid crap. Oh, Mars isn't the M&M's. Sorry, you'll have a Nestle or something or some other company coming out with bleeding nonsense. This is the statement anyway, folks. I'll read it out to you. I mean, it's actually like, I mean, I love these characters, and this is the thing. Again, this is, it's chocolate, they're characters, but the ads, the M&M ads were always bleeding funny, even growing up as a kid, and obviously they got the adult humor in it as well. Goes over our heads as kids. Obviously, as an adult now, I'm like, oh, the dirty bastards. But when you're kids, that goes over your heads. But we love these characters, right? But it's erasing everything from our childhood, right? Everything that we little things like, and I know they're only small little things, but all of these small little things add up. And before we know it, listen, they're already burning books. All right. Well, listen, we're gone backwards in society, right? Bottom line is, okay, we've gone back to the 1940s during that period of time, burning books, destroying art, censoring people, telling people how they should think, feel, and all of this, who they should love. Right, this is exactly what was going on during World War II, and it's happening again. Now, it's happened, obviously, throughout our history. But why does this is another thing why does this keep repeating? It's like a repeated cycle, because this is another repeated cycle. Why does it keep happening? Why are we incapable of evolving and just keep moving forward and striding forward, do great things? Like, we can achieve great things if we put our mind to it and stop getting bogged down on all of this nonsense. Right? But so, I mean, for fuck's sake, it's chocolate. But here's the statement anyway. America, let's talk. It's always America, though, by the way. So I just want to say, even though I'm married to an American and I love her, but goddamn our bleeding country, they've fucked up this world big time. In the last year, we've made some changes to our beloved spokes candies.
Oh,
We weren't sure if anyone would even notice. So why did you do it? And so, right, if you didn't think anybody would notice, then why did you do it in the first place, you morons? And we definitely didn't think it would break the internet. But now we get it. Even a candy shoes can be polarizing. Oh, Jesus Christ. What was the last thing M&M's wanted, since we were all about bringing people together? Therefore, we have
I thought you were about selling
decided to take-
chocolate.
we have decided to take an indefinite pause from the spokes candies. In their place, we are proud to introduce a spokesperson America can agree on. The beloved Maya Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer.
Never heard
We are
of them.
confident Miss Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, will champion the power and fun to create a world where everyone feels like they belong. Right, Eminem, so I just got one thing to say to you. You make fucking chocolate. That's your job. Your job is not to fucking tell us that we should be nicer to each other. We'll be nicer to each other if we want to be. All right. Your job is to fucking make us candy, make us chocolate so we can enjoy it. Your job is not to fucking preach to us. Okay. Won't be buying any more M&Ms, and I'm serious. I've already fucking boycotted KFC. I won't be buying another M&M ever again. You are a bunch of twats pandering to a bunch of idiots that are just soft and weak-minded. Right? We fucking raised a generation of pussies. All right? You all need to grow up, right? Fucking high heels fucking offending you. What next? Seriously, shoes. Someone got offended. Well, Lee is right. They're not really offended. They're just a bunch of fucking idiots that just want to feel that they belong, so they'll complain about anything to make them feel they belong part of a group or whatever, because they're just...
Belong to what?
I don't know.
I mean, belong to what exactly?
I do feel sorry for them,
weird
though,
corporate utopia or something.
They have low self-esteem. They obviously don't believe in themselves, so they join all of these different fucking cults and these different fucking crusades, and what they don't realize is that it's not really them that has this idea. They're just following the crowd. They're just basically sheep. We've raised a generation of fucking sheep. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves.
If you're going to spend your life spouting talking points handed to you by corporations and government, and believe in these things, and then talk about being, anti-fascist. I mean, it blows my mind, frankly. I mean, when you have a perfect marriage of state and corporation, all singing in unison from the same hymn sheet, and you've got green-haired, pierced teenagers or 20-somethings who act like teenagers, all singing the same hymn sheet. That is ultra conformity. It doesn't really bode well for our future. These are the people who are going to look after us when we're old.
No. They're not going to look after us, right? Let's tell it as it is.
They're going to switch us off.
Right? What they're going to do is they're going to do what the Germans did, right? They talk about it all the time. They want to get rid of us, right? They've made it clear they want to get rid of us. Let's not beat around the bush about this, right? They've talked about genocide. They've talked about murdering babies, right? They've talked all of this stuff. Let's say it as it is. They want us gone. They want us gone. And boy, fuck am I going anywhere? And these little knobheads telling me what to do. I live my life the way I want to live my life. You live your life the way you want to live your life. And you keep out of my business and I'll keep out your fucking business. But the problem is that these gobshites on the left won't keep out of their business. So we have to fight back, because we don't fight back, then our children's children will be fucking ruined. And this is what we're doing it for. This is why we do all of this. It's all interconnected. It's not. It's a pop culture war, but it's a war in society as well. Everything, our freedoms are being taken away from us, slowly eroded. We're being distracted by all of this fucking nonsense, and then the governments are working behind our backs, right? And we've seen what they're capable of. We've seen it during this pandemic what they're capable of, right? Okay, we're living in a very dangerous fucking time right now, and people need to start wising up and standing up. Because I tell you, if we don't, we're going to regret it. I'm telling you, we're going to regret it. And we're already regretting it. Look what's happening to our kids. Right? This is no fucking joke anymore. Look what happens to Lee on a daily basis on Twitter. Man, it breaks my heart when I see what's happening to him. Homophobia, fucking racism, people fucking having a go at him because he's Jewish. Fucking, I'm telling you, man, me growing up, I never experienced any shit like that in society. You know what? We had our problems in society. I'm not going to lie. But you know what? People were nicer to each other. We've just lost the ability to be kind, and it's absolutely disgraceful. But we will pay if we don't speak up, folks. And we have to keep speaking up. And it doesn't matter what area we speak up in, right? You have your people out there that are defending women's spaces and stuff like that, people that defend pop culture and people that do all the other stuff. We all need to keep doing that and not give up on this fight, because if we do, it's generations after us that will suffer. Trust me. But let's get back. You are right. I went on a bit of a rant there, but this seriously though, this is close to me heart, man, because I don't think people realize how bad. I don't think people realize how bad it actually is out there. It's really bad, folks, and we need to wise up. We need to come together.
I think if people aren't aware of it now, they're not really likely to ever be aware of it.
Yeah, well, you're right about that.
There is a cult mentality out there. There is a massive level of conformity I've certainly never seen in my lifetime. It's almost as if we're under siege. Someone once said to me, and I think it's very true, and I think it does speak to the sort of cult-like mentality of it, which is you don't know you're in a cult until you try to leave.
Yeah.
And I think that we are in that situation, and
I agree.
I've seen, there are people out there, who've been subsumed into this culture and then woken up to the woke, and then found themselves pretty much at the pointy end of the stick, going, I was right. This is a cult. Yeah, I mean, it is worrying. Pop culture really is more of the symptom of where we are at.
Yeah. Well, they're using that as a tool. They're using pop culture as a tool. They're using their pop culture as a tool to push all of this agenda. But talking about agenda, there is a TV show out there right now that's causing, obviously, a lot of.
I haven't had my go on that one yet. It's very quickly. This stuff will collapse. It will collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. It inevitably does. This is because it's fundamentally a game of it's a maximalizing game of sort of purity competition. This is why the people very often targeted for cancellation are people who were absolutely in on the cult mentality up until 5 minutes ago. Mark Hamill last week liked a tweet by J.K. Rowling without knowing the context. This is Mark Hamill who propagates for the war in Ukraine, for example, but no, he likes a tweet that he didn't understand the context of, so he's persona non grata. J.K. Rowling before him was a doyen of the fashionable left and is now the most unspeakably evil person since Voldemort. Someone at some point will remember that Mars, which owns M&M's, is still facing allegations of child slavery in the Ivory Coast, and that its spokes candies will not be able to hide that. Eventually, that's going to come out. People will start cancelling them as well. It eats itself. It's a terrible period to be living through because because it can seem incredibly oppressive. But these people are doing way more damage to themselves than anybody from the outside the cult can do. They will eat each other, and then we'll all move on with whatever tattered remains of society are left. And that's my contribution to that section.
Well, we're going to get you to speak a little bit more because you are our special guest. So let's talk about a topic that you actually are familiar with.
This is going to be one I don't want to talk about, isn't it? It's going to be Velma again.
Nicholas Horton has actually brought it up there, Velma. So obviously, the social media sites out there, the media, are saying that this show is very successful. And on the other hand, you have people that have watched the show and reviewed it, and he says it's a train wreck. But can I, before we get the little platoon in on this one, I'm just going to make this brief. But I would say this to people, right? If there are shows like this that you know are going to be car crashes, you know the best thing we can actually do is not highlight them. Because the more you highlight it, people are going to go in and check it out. And I think that's what's happened with the fact that this
I think
show
a lot of
apparently...
YouTubers went out and said, for God's sake, whatever you do, don't watch it. I think that's probably the worst thing you can do, because
it's had the opposite effect.
You go off and do the opposite, exactly.
Yeah,
but
I tried to watch the first episode, as you know, guys, and I got I think it was about 7 minutes in or something, and it was the cringiest thing ever. But here's one for you: Cheryl fucking loves it.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Really?
my wife loves it. So I'm in a catch-22 situation here, you know what I mean? Because I can't say anything about it.
Send it to me, I'll break her other foot. Send her over.
Yeah, but she likes it. But the little platoon, obviously, this has been your topic of conversation on your channel recently. You have been talking about this show. Have you watched every single episode, yeah?
No, I've not caught up on the most recent two. I only did 2 videos because they came and cancelled my first video, so I thought I didn't have a fair shot at it. But the first video did end with the injunction: do not go and watch this show. I don't quite agree with the argument that if you ignore it, it goes away, in the sense that nobody was asking for this before it arrived. So a lack of people's attention and clamoring for it didn't stop it from coming into being. If they're going to be spending money anyway, like on renewing it for a season 2, would you rather they spent that money on season 2 of something you don't care about, like Velma, or that they spent that money adapting and then ruining a different franchise instead? There is that, and also a lot of the polls that come out which show that Velma is incredibly quote-unquote successful in terms of its popularity. I think the ratings agency they used to produce that figure, it compiles that figure looking not only at views, because the streaming service doesn't really announce those anyway, it also looks at engagements on social media, so how many people have liked posts about it and how many people have mentioned it in hashtags and conversation. That doesn't say anything at all about whether the people are A, watching it, or B, liking it, or, well, the watching it thing is probably the most important one of those. The fact that something gains an immense amount of social traction online doesn't mean that people are actually flocking to watch it. And there's no one-to-one relationship between people ostensibly promoting it by criticizing it and the studio behind it being comfortable with that. And if you look at Amazon and its strenuous attempts to block all criticism of Rings of Power, that suggests to me that actually a lot of studios would rather shut critics up than allow critics to promote their show on their behalf. For every one comment I get under my videos saying, it sounds so bad, but I'm going to go and watch it, I probably get about 20 saying, my God, I'm not going to go and watch this show now. So there's no, I don't think, relationship between, people can get very moralistic about, if you're doing YouTube videos on a bad show, why aren't you just ignoring it? Because then it will go away. You're inviting more of it. I don't think the evidence backs that up.
Well, you're making money either way.
Well, I'm monetizing it anyway, so I'm happy with that. It gains an audience, that's fine. But more importantly, I think it is, there is no one-to-one relationship. You can't cancel a show that's already in production, that's already got something announced, simply by not covering it once it's out. That's living in denial. In many cases, people will probably go and watch a thing not knowing in advance how bad it is, more than they will go and watch it if they know in advance how bad it is. This is all me playing sort of defense for my own career, but nevertheless, Amazon's is instructive. Amazon instituted 30-day blocks on reviews for Rings of Power on its own website. It had people manually checking every single one of my videos. It took like 13 upload attempts because people were manually trying to take them down on spurious grounds.
God.
It's they would rather if they have the money to they would much rather censor criticism than allow it, I think. But these shows are going to be made, and if they are going to be made, then it's the job of a critic to criticize them, and you can live in denial if you like. You don't have to watch it, you don't have to watch videos about it either, but don't stop other people from doing that.
I don't think it's going to last forever, particularly anyway. I think once the novelty is worn off, yes, people will be watching it, hate watching it, or watching it to see how absolutely disgusting it is. But I think once that novelty wears off, when it comes to season 2, which we know is in the pipeline and coming, I think that novelty will wear off very quickly. So I don't think it has many legs to carry it forward
No.
anyway.
There's also a defense in its own right of hate watching. I mean, what is hate watching? Why do people hate watch things? They're taking enjoyment out of it. That's a form of viewership.
Yes.
And that's a form of entertainment in its own right. I don't really understand this supposed condemnation of hate watchers either. I frequently hate watch things. There are some films that are so bad they are enjoyable. There are some films that are so bad in such a cringy way that you could take some kind of perverse pleasure from it. And as a critic, it's very useful to watch bad shows because it's a good way of explaining why they're bad and what you can do to fix things. The challenge of fixing Velma is, I think, beyond anyone at this point. But it's still an interesting dynamic that you can go through. You can say, this is a joke that they've told. This just doesn't work. It's so painfully unfunny. How could you recontextualize that or change it up or change the delivery? What about it is bad? And if you're writing your own comedy, what then do you avoid doing? In the case of Velma, you avoid absolutely everything it's doing. But it's interesting to explore why that is.
Are we just sadomasochists? Perhaps we've
Oh,
gotten to
definitely.
the point in our culture where we're just, oh yeah, whip me harder, Velma. I mean, I don't know. Is that where we're at? It just seems to me that in response, isn't it? You know, it's this terrible thing. We must, bang pots about this, and then we just end. I think we've gotten so trained into accepting that everything down the line is just going to be god awful shite, so that we end up just either watching it or talking about it, and it's like poking ourselves in the eye with a sharp stick. Obviously, some people who have the nous, like your good self, monetize the shit out of it. So well done you. But I think for the general population, it seems to me rather counterproductive. But at the same time, I guess it's the kind of car crash scenario, isn't it? You can't help but rubberneck. I think that's just nature, human nature, to sort of want to know what the latest hubbub is all about, and to to watch it in slow motion as it crashes into the wall.
It
Could be
has a
that.
positive
There is a
knock-on effect as
fetishism
well.
about it.
There is, definitely. But it has positive knock-on effects as well, in the sense that if you're saturated by this media environment that gives you nothing but absolute garbage, and then one thing comes along that's actually at least average, if not quite good, you find yourself flocking to that a lot more. I mean, I think Andor is probably a good example given the parlor state of Star Wars. It's been unremittingly bad. The Mandalorian had maybe one half good season, and that was about it. But the rest of it's been terrible. Then Andor comes out, and notwithstanding those who say that it was boring because they have no attention span, most people who watched that show and enjoyed that show could say, actually, this is a really pleasant surprise. It's a pleasant surprise not only because it's quite good in its own right, it's a pleasant surprise because it is quite good in its own right. In other words, it's not like everything else that's around. The Last of Us comes out. I've not played the games, but people who've played the games and loved at least the first of them looked at the show, expected it to be terrible like everything else is, and again were pleasantly surprised when it transpired not to be. So it fills you with a new appreciation of the rare good moments in modern media, but it also renews your appreciation of the brilliant media of days gone by. I mean, it's another way of enjoying the original Star Wars, is to go try and watch a bit of The Last Jedi, turn it off, and go back to Empire Strikes Back instead and just wallow in it like a warm bath.
Absolutely. I think it does make you appreciate the things that we have had, but at the same time, actually, now I think of it, I mean, I was going to say it's finite, but really there's still so much wonderful stuff that is there in the past. It can make us actually appreciate what we do have. And yeah, like you say, there are the odd gems that sort of turn up in the the midst of the rough that you see. I like, for example, I really enjoyed Wednesday. I was half expecting to abjectly hate it because it had all the tropes that you would expect to be there, but it was actually well written, well acted, and good fun. And I really didn't expect that, and that's a shame, really, to have to go in with that mindset. But at the same time, you do find yourself finding yourself quite relieved and able to enjoy something for once.
Exactly.
But it just seems such a shame that if you look back in the golden age of, well, I call it the golden age of cinema, the 1980s, every year there was a slate of films that were an absolute must-see. There were classics, 1984 particularly was a great year. And now you're just struggling to find one film that you can talk about with, in good faith, and that it's a good film. It's a sad state.
I find myself as well. I've noticed I've started now to be a bit more bolder, but I see a new movie pop up and I'll ignore it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And there was one that actually came out a few weeks back called The Old Way with Nicolas Cage as a cowboy, and I thought this is going to be terrible, this movie. So I kept putting it off, but every time I kept going in to watch a movie, this movie was popping up, and I said, feck it, I'll put it on and I'll see if it's any good. And you know what? Is it the greatest cowboy movie I've ever seen? Absolutely not, right? But is it well acted? And it's got a basic plot. It's Nicolas Cage, basically. He was a bit of a wild gunman. He settles down, has a wife and kids, and then his past comes back to haunt him, and something happens, and you see, and then he goes for revenge and stuff like that. It's your classic kind of cowboy movie, but I thought, Nicolas Cage, can he pull this off? Do you know what? He was pretty impressive in it. I have to say, I really enjoyed it. But
I think it does force you to reappraise. It does force you to reappraise older films or films that might not necessarily have had the same exposure. I mean, because we've been subjected to such a dearth of shit. It does make you appreciate some things which are just not necessarily the greatest things, but are quite simple in terms of writing and production or whatever. But at the same time, though, would we revise these other movies in a positive light as much as we do now, because everything has turned such?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I'd even, if we were getting great movies released every month or whenever they release movies, if we were getting a steady stream of great movies and TV shows, I wouldn't even never have watched that Nicolas Cage movie. And that's being honest with you, because it looks like it looks like one of those straight to, like it does. But as you said yourself, I don't know if it is, and I think it is, because we were saying this when we do Doctor Who watch-alongs. We were saying a lot of these episodes were better than. Were they better than what we thought when we watched them originally, or is it because we've had 5 years of shite that now these episodes that we didn't really like have been elevated somehow because of our mindset, because of we being fed crap time and time again? So, but I can honestly tell you, I don't think I would have ever have watched that movie with Nicolas Cage, a cowboy one. I would have probably laughed if I seen it, if we were getting a steady stream of great movies. But why not? Why not? I mean, I have watched some new movies recently. The Banshees of Inisherin. I could see why that's up for Oscars. That is an absolutely brilliant movie. And as I said, I watched The Old Way, and then I watched the new Christian Bale movie. And I'm going to give Megan a go because everybody seems to have enjoyed it. But you know me, I'll go in and watch it anyway myself. I don't listen to anybody anymore.
Yeah, I watched Megan last night. It was very, very good, actually. I was a bit wary, obviously. There were a few tropes in there that were a bit of an eye roll. But then you think, well, she's still a killer robot, so she can't be, talk about toxic masculinity when she's being toxic feminine.
Oh, she's a gay icon now.
Of course she is. Of course
Yeah,
she is.
she's a gay
Everything is
icon now, apparently. Yeah. Some media outlet wrote an article and said she's a gay icon. There you go. You just can't leave it. Even a robot now has to, have a something, a robot.
But
Yeah, I mean,
you
it's a
do
killer
find
dog.
the audience is pushed to, as you say yourself, you go and watch films that you would never previously considered watching
Yeah.
because your usual destinations are just producing garbage. You're already seeing that across lots of different forms of media. I mean, the rise of Korean film and appreciation for Korean film at the moment. And it's one example of that. The popularity of manga over comic books is another example of that, because East Asia, by and large, hasn't gone in for the kind of nonsense that we've become obsessed by in the West. They're still producing good films with good stories, telling stories for their own sake, adhering to art for art's sake. As a result, when people go and they find them, they might not have considered doing it before, but what else are you going to watch on Netflix? Oh, well, let's give this Squid Game thing a try. Actually, that's not terrible. I wonder if the Koreans have anything else that's quite good. Oh, Parasite. Actually, that's quite good. And it goes on. The audience will find good media from somewhere. It just requires people to produce it. And the saying "go woke, go broke" applies, I think, against the hate watching argument as well, in the sense that many of these Western films are already losing money, or that they're making much less money than they otherwise would have made had they been, good. But they're still making them because there's a divorce between the commissioners of these shows and these films, and the producers of the shows and the films, and the audience that they used to serve. That used to be the case, that you wanted to please your audience, and now they seem to think that they know better than their audience, and their audience must be educated into agreeing with them. The audience, of course, knows better. But these things would be made. Velma was made, as I said at the beginning. Velma was made without anybody asking for it. It wasn't hate watchers who conjured that into being. The Last Jedi was made without anybody asking for it. It wasn't hate watchers who conjured that into being. All of the terrible media that comes out that's new, that's a new, either new property, or it's a new reboot, or it's a new adaptation, comes into being for exactly the same reason as it carries on going, and it's divorced from the box office to a large degree. It's entirely to do with satisfying the ideological whims of those who create it.
Yeah, it's interesting debate. Because it's fascinating, because there's movies and TV shows that I know I wouldn't normally be watching. It's mad. And even as I said to Lee, we do Doctor Who watch-alongs here, and some episodes that when we watched originally we really didn't like, but then we were watching them again after the 5 years that we've had with the previous showrunner, and these episodes come across as classics. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The quality has gone down so much that we will literally grab onto anything that's half decent because it's that bad. I mean, Cobra
Yeah, I
Kai
mean,
has been one of the shiners. That's finishing up now shortly. There's they've announced the last season. I mean, okay,
I think it's right to
out.
end it now. Yeah.
I think it is on a high, but at the same time, I'm kind of saying it's one of the most entertaining shows on TV right now, and it gets everybody talking. And now that's gone. So now we're all hoping to see what's going to replace it. What's the next thing that's going to replace that now? Oh, you keep bringing that up, don't you? Yeah. You keep bringing that up. I have to check it out. I know. I keep saying I will. I'll check it out. I'll check it out. But Leland has a question for the panel. Has anyone seen the vampire film called Eating Locals?
I don't think I have.
No.
Tell us more.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. I have seen Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, whatever you call it, that movie. That's now. Listen, if you're in the right mood, if you're in the right mood, right, and you just want a fun movie, right, and not take the plot too seriously, that movie is enjoyable. Trust me, it is. I like stupid movies like that sometimes. There's nothing wrong with movies like that. I mean, Flash Gordon is a cult classic, but let's be honest about it. It's a shit movie. It's crap.
Wait a minute.
Listen, I love it myself, but let's not be fucking around the bush. it's a fucking shit movie, right? But it's a cult classic, and we have a soft spot for it. You know, it's like me. Everybody gives me stick. I love Flight of the Navigator. I grew up with that movie, man. That movie just changed my life. I love that movie, but that movie gets stick. A lot of people don't like that movie, and I think it's highly underrated. And I keep defending it. I will till the day I die because I love it. But Flight of the Navigator is a great movie. Actually, talking about remakes, we forgot to bring this up actually, because I showed Lee this remake that they're doing, and he wasn't too pleased. So you will get his opinion on it. But Death Becomes Her, you know, that classic movie with Bruce Willis, Goldie Hawn, and what was it, Meryl Streep? Yeah, well, it looks like it's getting a remake, and Goldie's daughter is obviously going to be in the movie. Now, me and Lee had a little bit of a discussion about this. I will say the fact that her daughter is in it might be a saving grace, but I'm kind of like Lee. I'm sick of all of these remakes. I mean, how many remakes do we need? And they never really turn out as good as the original. I'm not saying no remake has ever surpassed the original, because people would argue Scarface. You know, the original is great, but the Al Pacino one is just, for me, is another level. Personally, that's just a personal thing, but you know, there are cases where these movies can surpass the original. But Lee, you don't like the idea of a Death Becomes Her.
What's the
remake.
point? What is the point?
Money. They're greedy.
I know it's a brand, and I think Hollywood is just always relying on names. I mean, look at the Hocus Pocus 2 thing. That really wasn't very successful, was it? I don't remember anyone talking about it beyond Halloween 2 years ago, whenever it was. I just don't find the need for it. I mean, the film itself, the original film, was perfect. Absolutely perfect.
It was.
It was a brilliant, wacky comedy. Great
Dark humor.
Meryl Streep.
Brilliant.
Meryl Streep was great. Goldie Hawn was fantastic.
Brilliant.
Always a great comedy actress. And Bruce Willis. I just don't.
Bruce Willis was great in that movie.
That. Yeah,
Bruce Willis was good in that movie.
They all were. I mean, is it going to be a remake, or is it going to be a reimagining? Do I care? That's the question.
Yeah.
It's
Ben,
best left where it was.
Ben, have you any opinion on this? What is your opinion on remakes? Would you be in favor, or do you think they should just create new stuff all the time and just keep moving forward?
That would be lovely if they did. I mean, part of the reason you have so many remakes and so many sequels and reboots is because there doesn't seem to be anyone with an ounce of imagination left. And George Lucas once did an interview saying that, you know, certain parts of the 1970s, it was actually easier to get a new film made in the Soviet Union than it was in Hollywood, because in the Soviet Union, all you needed to do was please the government, and you, roughly speaking, knew what the government wanted, and as long as you passed certain checks, you could do largely what you wanted. That was in a very specific time period. Things changed very quickly after that. Whereas Hollywood at that time, and Hollywood, I think ever since, really, or certainly since the 1980s, has always been the most difficult place to get a brand new project off the ground, in the sense that you need to show in advance, or you used to need to show in advance, that you had a proper moneymaker on your hands, ideally something with franchise potential, something that minimized risk and maximized reward. And that risk-averse nature of modern Hollywood is not brilliant for storytelling. We've sort of just reached that period, but sort of to the max at this stage. Now it's just the case that we don't have any new stories to tell. On the rare occasion we try and do them, they tend to bomb. But we've still got a load of the 80s products that everyone really loved, and we haven't done anything with those for about 20 years. So why not? Yeah, let's do Indiana Jones 5. Let's bring The Lion King back, do a sequel for that. Let's bring Star Wars back and carry on going with that. Let's do Jurassic Park again, but worse. And it just goes on and on and on. And these things it's a complete dearth of imagination. And unfortunately, for now at least, they are still making enough money that Hollywood will carry on doing it. Eventually, you have to hope the audience will get bored of soulless remakes and they will stop
Can I
making
ask you,
money.
Ben, do you think it is a lack of creative talent, or do you think it's just, or is it just laziness? They're taking the easy option because, as you said, you get an already established franchise and then you add another movie onto it. That it kind of is
a safe
the
bet.
easy. Yeah, it's the
safer
safer option.
There's an element of both in there, but there's also a big problem with the way Hollywood sources its creative talent now, and that's it used to be the case up until up until the 1980s and maybe the early part of the 1990s. You would have actors who had grown up, say, in the South of America. They were conservative leaning. There was much more ideological diversity amongst directors, amongst writers, and amongst actors. Many of the actors in the great films of the 60s, 70s, and 80s had wartime experience. And they were very conservative men. Ronald Reagan famously goes on to become a president. I think 3 of the cast of the original Predator film went on either to be, they all went on to do good things in American politics, and they were all on the right of American politics. I mean, Arnie was to the right of... he was to the left on the Republican Party, but he was still on the right. That's completely shifted, I think, really in the last 20 years when you stopped sourcing creative people from backwater towns in America, and now you all have to go to the same film schools in California. You all have to go to the same film schools in New York, and the people you grow up making movies with are the people you went to school with. Your directors come from the same background as your actors, and your actors come from the same background as your writers. There's not going to be much ideological diversity, and that's really where creativity comes in. There's no new, fresh ideas being brought in because the system selects against them. If you try and go into Hollywood now as a professed conservative and you want to tell, a great gun-toting action romp of the 1980s, you will be laughed out of the room if you even get into the room because the studios aren't prioritizing that.
What's happening in Hollywood is what's happened to the pop music industry. It's become very soulless, very corporatized. Again, it's going back to the making these things academic, making them so sterile and so it's just become sterile because it has become a thing of study, a thing of politics. As we know, politics is now synonymous with academia, but obviously very skewed in a particular direction. And it has created a very stunted idea. It's propagated by old hacks who clearly didn't make it in Hollywood, who are now educating those who will become the next elite within Hollywood. Those who fail teach is the old adage, and I think that's proving very, very true. And the fruit is being born, from that, and it doesn't bode well. And as I said, the Brit School and all these other sort of performing arts colleges and things which produced all the top pop acts, all written by the same 5 producers. We're at that stage now with Hollywood. Next will be computer games because everything's going in the same direction. And like the music industry, Hollywood is too slow to adapt. It's too slow, too stupid to change its ways. It doesn't know when the wind is changing. It's always the last to react. It's like mobilizing the Russian army in the First World War. It just takes too long. And by that point, technology and audiences will have changed. It won't be that long in the future before we're all at our own computers, making our own movies, using artificial intelligence to create all the films we want to watch anyway. And they'll all be out of a job.
Well, fans are already doing that, though. You can already see that there are a lot of fan productions over, it's always been a thing, but I think over the last few years especially, there's a lot more fans now getting together and they're coming up with their own fan productions. And, some of them are like Hollywood quality. They're very well done and put together.
It's only going to get better, yeah.
But that may be the future, man. You're probably right. If Hollywood,
it will be.
Look, as Ben said, like that Hollywood can will stay on this course for as long as they can possibly do, because at some stage, well, they're already losing money, right? But they're not losing enough money, because some movies that they do release or TV shows that they do release are making them money. The problem is as long as they're still making money, they'll
Well, they're
continue
getting
down
funded. They must,
this route.
to continue doing what they're doing, to lose that kind of money. They must, and the fact that they're all producing movies that have the same messaging in it. I mean, it does seem not fairly unreasonable to assume that they're getting venture capitalists or certain think tanks and corporations or whatnot funding these
A lot
things
of
on the
it,
quiet.
it's more institutional investors, I think, than it is, say, venture capitalists. And it goes back to, I think, the point that was raised earlier about all these things being interconnected. If you're trying to court inward investment from a big institutional investor, you, amongst other things, will have to prove to that investor that your studio, your company, has a pretty good ESG score. Now, the E aspect of it tends to be overlooked in films because it's not quite so obvious, but the S and the G, particularly the S, because social good is so nebulous and undefinable a concept that it has been the subject of political capture almost straight from the beginning. A film studio which turns around to an institutional investor and says, we are going to be pushing messages that stress the S to boost our ESG score, will gain a lot more money than a studio which doesn't pay any attention to that kind of thing, because international finance has been largely captured by this quite extremely niche movement with undefinable terms, or terms that are so loosely defined that they can be manipulated by any given political activist. You've effectively got Mark Carney in charge of the vast majority of international finance for no adequately explained reason. So a studio which doesn't prioritize the right value set will not attract the same inward investment, so it won't be able to compensate itself for losses, whereas a studio which does have the high ESG score can compensate it for lower performing films because it's attracting more inward investment as a result of the score produced by the shit film that nobody actually wants to go and see. But the fan point's interesting because, you would think the easy answer for all of this, for many, like take The Witcher as an example on Netflix, or any equivalent property, which has, an incredibly deep lore and an incredibly passionate fan base, same with the MCU and Marvel Comics. Well, can you not find some way of stressing the S and ESG whilst also telling stories that are basically what the fans want to see? But then you get that other aspect of institutional capture, which has, people at Marvel Studios quite proudly coming out and saying, we deliberately hire people who have no knowledge or experience with or love of the comics because we want people to be able to see things with fresh eyes and take it in fresh new directions, by which they mean we only want people who think exactly as we do.
Yeah.
And that just produces absolute garbage. It's why Henry Cavill will leave The Witcher, but a Superman film written by Ta-Nehisi Coates might still be released, which is just absolutely insane. But that's the world we live in.
Really
one of them has a good ESG score and the other one doesn't.
And also, you think about how often they keep talking about the message and all these intersectional concepts of diversity and inclusion. Yet, why have they not? Why has Hollywood not done a film about the Anansi stories, African gods and things like that, or the Indian Mahabharat or something like that? Again, another wonderful mythology with gods and creation myths and all this kind of stuff. If they were really invested in multiculturalism and all these lofty ideals, then why are they just so obsessed with just purely race swapping white characters with people of color, just arbitrarily? It doesn't seem very genuine. It seems highly motivated by this very strange cultish religion that we're currently living through. It doesn't seem to speak to me that they have any genuine concerns about promoting multicultural mythologies or stories, which there are so many countless wonderful stories that we'll never get to hear about because Hollywood doesn't really invest in any of that at all. It's all lip service. None of it actually means anything to anybody. They're not really caring about people of color or the cultures from which they originate from, which really is depriving, with that kind of reach that Hollywood has, is depriving all those people and us of stories that would actually be of actual value. and I think that's a shame. I think if you want to talk about things like that, if you want to bring about educating people about different cultures and things, and why are you not doing it in the most authentic way possible? Because they don't care.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't. And that's the whole point of it all. And this is what we're trying to tell the other side. They actually do not care about LGBTQ plus rights. They don't care about skin color. They don't care about all of that. They're pandering because
Well, no, I mean the Disney posters prove that, really, don't they? I mean, there's no
yeah, and
getting away
apparently
from it.
Disney is doing. I don't know if it's true, but I think Disney is doing some deal with China.
But my
or something.
God, blue people representation. That's important.
Because that was also bad because they didn't cast actual blue people to play the blue people. I think that was the
Yeah.
thing, wasn't it? But part of it, there is an ideological problem there in the sense that, you say, why aren't we adapting more, of the brilliant myths of Africa and of East Asia? Well, and ostensibly people who, a lot of people would be in favor of doing that. The problem is the same people who say, why aren't we properly representing Africans in film? If as soon as you turn around and you say, well, okay, let's do Arabian Nights, they'll say, why are you culturally appropriating something from Africa? It's like, well, which of these two do you want? Do you want representation, which might have to have a white person in charge of a film studio, which is adapting a work of fiction from a different continent? Or do you want cultural fidelity, in which case you can't adapt works from other cultures without appropriating them, so you're not allowed? And then that flips on its head when it comes to anything else. The Little Mermaid, it's perfectly acceptable to race swap the Little Mermaid because, well, that's a Northern European myth, and actually Europeans have no culture, apparently. That's acceptable cultural appropriation. Or when Gal Gadot is cast as Cleopatra, and then you have a group of African Americans, North African Americans, whatever they would want to call themselves, again, always in America, saying, why the hell isn't Cleopatra being played by an Arab? She's in Egypt. Because she was Greek, you absolute moron. What are you talking about? But I think
these people.
Part of the origin, I think, comes from the fact that there aren't actually that many people from Africa working high up in Hollywood. And I don't think there are a huge number of ethnic Chinese people working very high up in Hollywood either. The entire cultural frame of reference at the moment in Hollywood debates about race is between African Americans and white Americans. And African Americans have about as much to do with Africa as I do with my Viking ancestors. Nothing to do with it, in other words. The entire cultural frame of reference is entirely Western. So you get, I don't know, Black Panther 2, Wakandan Boogaloo. How African is that film, really? Well, they've stolen some of the dresses, they've mangled some languages together, and they've done some funny dances. Because that's the African-American idea of what Africa is. Tribal savages with magical bullshit meteors with incredible technology which has just been handed to them by the cosmos. That's not fidelity to your African roots, my friends. If you're trying to be fidelitous to your African roots, don't invent ceremonies like Kwanzaa and then claim that was a traditional African Christmas. It's not. That's compensatory. The problem is that there are not very many actual Africans working in Hollywood. If you had more actual Africans working in Hollywood as opposed to African Americans, you probably would have a greater array of myths on which to draw. But because African Americans are fundamentally Western, their frames of reference are entirely Western. It's Greek myths, Roman myths, and a kitsch idea of what their ancestors were like, which bears no resemblance to the real thing.
Well, this is what people whose arguments are, if white people move into an area, it's gentrification. If they move out, it's white flight. So, I mean, you're talking about people who can't even keep to one argument. They always contradict themselves in every possible way it's conceivable. We see this in absolutely everything that they do. We see it in the gender wars. We see it in the race wars. We see it, and it's all a manipulation of critical theory and blah, yada yada. We all know the score, but really, it's paying lip service to these kinds of issues with a postmodernist critical race or critical gender, queer theory, whatever lens. You're never going to get a satisfactory result because you'll never be able to please any of these people because everything is such a contradiction 24/7. Yeah. They're confused themselves and they're confusing everyone else, and they'll never be happy until we're all confused and go home. It's a self-defeating exercise from start to finish, and Hollywood is again too slow to catch up with it because they're trying to chase their own tail with this thing. and it's never going to go anywhere. It's never going to resolve itself. And ultimately, all it will end up in is a morass of complete confusion, no sales, no bums on seats, and everyone being just really pissed off.
So, Lee, we'll just, I wanted to show you this because I know you're going to have a very, a very,
You're not going to upset
I don't
me,
know,
are you?
well, I don't know what kind of reaction you're going to have, but we have
God.
actually hear you mentioned this book quite a lot. So, George Orwell's 1984, The Estate has approved a retelling from a woman's point of view.
Oh yeah. This is not new. This has been around, I think, at least 2 years. I think when I first saw this. I mean, it was like the reimagining of Brave New World, which they turned into a TV series a few years ago, and they managed to. Considering the story is about identity and the power of manipulating the populace through pleasure and wanting their own servitude through sensory, overload and drugs and all the rest of it, and sex, it managed somehow to portray that message by bringing in identity politics into the show about this very thing. It was such a weird betrayal because, when you think of someone, Grant Morrison, who wrote it, you'd think someone like him would have the nous to understand the source material, but he betrayed the source material. This is just another example of betraying the source material. You're injecting an authoritarian tyranny of ideas into a story about authoritarian ideas. It just never ceases to blow my mind that the lack of self-awareness in present. I think it has to be at this point to be done on purpose. Otherwise, it's beyond idiotic to present 1984 through the lens of feminism. I'm assuming it's feminism because it wouldn't. I can't imagine it would just be just because it's a woman. It's a weird. It's like a Brave New World presenting 1984, if that makes sense. What do you think?
But it's completely self-defeating. I mean, the point of 1984 is that there's no difference between a male and a female perspective if you're a citizen of Airstrip 1. That you've been depersonalized. There is no trust between wife and child. There's no such thing as sex. There's no such thing as love. There is only control. There's no family. There's no difference between the male and the female experience of that. The point of Airstrip 1 and the state of Oceania is to stop that from ever occurring. The idea that 1984 and the tyranny of the party would ever allow a feminist perspective to arise in the beginning is just self-evident nonsense. Like, have you read the book?
Oh God, help me!
These people are just crazy, man. I mean, it's just. I mean, every estate though seems to be selling out as well. I mean, I think it's Amazon or something that are getting involved, and if they've thrown money around, I think it's quite. I mean, the estates are there, aren't they, to kind of protect these
But
IPs.
it's clear what they're doing. They're taking stories like Brave New World, 1984, wokeifying them, and in that way presenting that as a new definitive version of the story is a corruption of that story. I mean, the irony upon ironies is piling up at this point. But ultimately, if you're introducing that to a whole new audience who've never read the books, who are going to watch those and think, oh, that's cool. But they're not going to walk away with what the intent was. It just seems to me very... it's a subversion. This is all Hollywood does now, is subvert. And obviously by subverting the most clear works pointing towards how subversion works and then subverting that, it's it just makes me want to tear my hair out.
Estates have no
All
actual
I can
role in
hope for is
protecting-
that people. No, I just hope that it makes people read the books if they still exist in the future, that they don't just rewrite those as well. Sorry.
Yeah, you can buy copies of The Lord of the Rings with the Rings of Power front cover on it now. So, that's...
I know.
I guess the text is still the same. But it's O'Sullivan's first law about... it's about institutions generally, but it applies just as well to estates as to corporations and funds. Any organization that is not constitutionally right-wing will become left-wing over time. And if you throw money at the thing as well, it explains why the Tolkien estate will happily cede its creative authority to Amazon. And it's... I mean, to be fair, the Orwell estate has been a pretty naff organization for a while anyway. The George Orwell Prize for journalism and truth-telling in journalism, which I think is awarded in part by the Orwell estate, was quite recently given to Carol Cadwallader, whose sole expertise is in making up Russian collusion links between Aaron Banks, Brexit, and Vladimir Putin. She won the Orwell Prize for her articles in The Observer, every single one of which had to have very lengthy retractions and corrections published 2 days after the actual articles. She was given the Orwell Prize for truth in journalism. The Orwell estate is a nonsense. I think there should be some kind
Brave
of
new
alternate
world,
mechanism.
my friend.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of alternate mechanism, I think, for estates and the like. There should be some kind of constitutional mechanism where you can put creative license behind lock and key in a safe that nobody can possibly touch. It's not to be reinterpreted, it's not to be rebooted, it's not to be readapted or recast. It has to stay exactly the same for a period of at least 150 years, because that's the only way of doing it. There was a guy in America, John M. Olin, I think his name was. He's a very rich guy. I think he got rich through oil, and he had a foundation to give money out in charity to specific causes that aligned with his political values. Now, most organizations like that, when the founder dies, will carry on. It will be put into a trust. There'll be trustees, and the trustees will carry on the organization. But John M. Olin looked at all the fate of every other organization, and he said, yeah, I don't want this to become a left-wing thing. So as soon as I die, the foundation's going to wind up and no one's allowed to do anything with my money ever again. So the John M. Olin Foundation no longer exists. And I think that's a very sane and sensible approach.
It probably
Well,
is
there's
the
a
way
control of your
forward.
legacy.
They're even doing it with actors that pass away now. The estates, well, some actors and actresses are given permission for their images and their
Selling Galaxy chocolate bars,
I don't know. I find that a bit when people have passed away. Yeah, and some things it's great to see some of these old characters come back from the dead and stuff like that. But I don't like the idea now that the movie studios now are actually trying to exploit this now. And I mean, apparently Carrie Fisher now signed something before she died, so her likeness can be used. I don't know if I actually agree with that.
Well, I think consent is important, but I think that's a personal choice.
But again, it just goes to show you that it's just for greed and money. Really, it's not done for any creative reasons. Because look, if you look,
that's true to a point. That's true to a point. But if Carrie Fisher can, for example, allow her image, her voice or likeness to be used in perpetuity forever, that money that is generated from that, if it's in her will or whatever, will be contractually going to her offspring and their offspring's offspring. So I guess as a nest egg, it's a pretty good idea. Why not?
It's fantastic for nepo babies. I mean, literally nepo babies and necro babies as well, in the sense that they're making all of their money off of their dead relatives. But I don't know. I think it's a really fascinating area that obviously that's becoming way more relevant as a question now that we have the ability to do it. I mean, and it's only improving. If you compare the Jeff Bridges de-aging in Tron Legacy to the Peter Cushing de-aging in Rogue One, and that's only a few years apart, just the difference in quality is staggering. And you might very well soon reach the point where they are basically indistinguishable from their living versions, and you can do voices now as well, with obviously Mark Hamill's de-aged voice, which was computerized, I think, in the book of Boba Fett, which it sounds so lifelike and yet just not quite there. But the not quite there bit will be find out in the future. Yeah, that will be improved upon over time. But once upon a time, you'd have recast these people. You'd have given new actors a chance to show what they can do in these iconic roles. And some of them would have grown up and done an incredibly good job, and they will become the new face of a much loved character. I don't know, maybe it's an old fashioned belief, but I think I prefer that, because you're never going to bring the full range of sort of human creative imagination to a role if you've put that role in the face of a computer. A recast Princess Leia isn't going to do anything Princess Leia never used to do, but if you recast her as a new actress, she might be able to give new subtlety and new interpretation to a much loved character.
Exactly. Make it our own, but also keep them with the original. You could do it. You could put your own take on things. I agree with you. I'm not a fan of this right now, and I know we're only in the early stages of it. But as soon as the technology improves, and it will improve fast, we're going to see a lot more of this. And I don't quite like the idea. I agree with you. I think if you want to keep making these things, then bring in new actors and actresses and give them a chance, and let's see what they can do.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think really what I imagine will happen, what I can conceive of happening is there will be a time. I mean, everything swings and roundabouts, peaks and troughs, and full circles. So I think eventually there will be a renaissance of some description that will harken back to more traditional things like real people and actual talent, hopefully. And I think there will be a period of time where things will become so uncanny valley to the point that you'll be submersed in your own fantasy film 3-dimensional head thing, VR, whatever, and you'll be able to type in ideas for a film, you starring so and so is dead and so is still alive, whatever, and bang, it'll just be on the screen. But there will be a hankering, I think, for authenticity. I think that you can't really replace the human experience with an artificial human experience. I don't think, however, it's going to look mind-blowing, no doubt. But I think there will come a time when you will reach saturation point and people will want to go back to something which has that level of authenticity to it. And I think there'll be an explosion of theatrical shows and live events. People will actually want to go out and watch someone acting live, or go out to the cinema and actually watch a real film made by real people, not an AI. So I think
that'll become a prestige thing, though, which is the interesting way in which these things pan out. I mean, if you look at, weirdly, I think there's almost an analogy with farming, in the sense that most people in this country will buy cheap food because it is cheap, which is imported from overseas. People with enough money to do so will buy British in the name of some kind of fidelity to the natural processes of the country. But there's no actual qualitative difference. I mean, there's difference in your mind. Food standards, you're told, are better, so you feel more honourable and noble getting the organic thing as opposed to the produced thing. But it fulfills the same function. It's just a different class of person who goes for it. And so whether you get that resurgence in, as you say, theatre going, which is already an incredibly middle and upper class pursuit anyway, whether that
that's also
becomes more entrenched as opposed to less, the masses go to the artificially intelligent cinematic productions, and the people who fancy themselves to be minded toward high culture go to theatre and want to watch live films, even though there might not even be a qualitative difference between them anymore.
That's true, but also on the flip side, you do also get underground movements and subcultures that also do mirror the high culture elitist activities, but do it in their own way. So you might have a continuation of rather than going to the West End today, some people might go to a room above a pub and watch a play. So I mean, there are those. I think it really does depend on what people are such. I don't necessarily think it has to boil down to particular class aspects, but I think it will be a difference in terms of how the masses, whether or not you're, you believe you're an elitist, or if you're just, a plebeian or whatever, I think there will be a universal human requirement, a need for something which will be authentic, that will be human more human than human,
Well, the thing about it is,
require you to want to interact.
If Hollywood keeps going down the same route, you will find people looking for new sources of entertainment, and this is where the theater and, as you said, those rooms above pubs where people will go and seek out their
As if there's
weekly
any pubs left.
entertainment. If there's any pub, yeah, they're trying to close them all down here as well. It's weird, but that's a different conversation for another
That's not
day.
Ireland anymore. That's not Ireland
But
anymore.
yeah, it's not. We're going dry like the rest of us. But seriously though, that's what will happen. We always go and find new forms of entertainment anyway. That's what we've always done. Hollywood eventually, as Lee says, they are slow on the take. They will eventually cop on, but when they do cop on, will it be too late? How bad will Hollywood be? What state will it be in? Will they be able to recover? Are they going to be able to recover from all of this? That's the big question that will need to be answered over the next couple of years. Will they be able to recover from this? A lot of people think they won't, especially Disney Plus. A lot of people think Disney Plus are in an awful lot of trouble right now. But you never know. All it takes is one or two good shows, and they can be back on their game again. And that's what's happening with some of these.
Yeah, but you can't continue to have 10 flops and just one success.
As Ben said, right now they can, and they'll keep doing that. I mean, we've had Kevin Feige come out just recently saying that he doesn't think there's fatigue in the genre that they're doing. There is fatigue. You're not reading the room. There's obviously fatigue.
Well, as I said,
he's also oversaturated the market with too many bleeding superhero movies, TV shows, or whatever. You're oversaturated. People, it is.
Yeah, it's the old quantity versus quality. Try and make what one film would have made. They have to make several different films to try and get the same back. It just seems like such a false economy, and I just don't understand really, the whole mechanism of why and how we've reached this point, other than that they've just managed to hire a bunch of incompetent people. I think all the old talent has grown old, has retired, and as the Lord said, you get all these people coming in from all these special schools, design film schools. And they've been taught by people who. Yeah. I think that's probably more accurate. Actually,
is that what we're calling them now? Special schools.
Special schools. Yeah, specialized maybe, but no, I think special. I think it has created a sort of drone culture of rinse, repeat. And it's not imagination. They don't encourage imagination. What they encourage is the message. And that's throughout all of academia. But as I say, it seems to me that those who teach are the ones who didn't, the ones who didn't really achieve what they were supposed to do. And that's been true from a great many number of years. But I think really where we're at is that you're churning out people who just do the same thing. They're not. I think it's the overeducated idiot. Those who studied everything to the nth degree, but really they've learned nothing, don't know anything. They've got no real life experience. They're not really encouraged to think outside the box, only to conform to whatever the current state of the zeitgeist is. And it doesn't have any diversity of thought. As was quite rightly pointed out, you have to belong to one very niche, very narrow spectrum of political beliefs in order to achieve anything. That needs to go. That needs to be challenged fundamentally for Hollywood to survive. It does need true blood from around America, particularly from Middle America, not just the East and West Coast, because I think you're losing so much raw, unfiltered talent that is just being ignored fundamentally, and that's such a huge waste of talent. And you're not replacing the really talented old guard who've now gone into retirement. I really wish that skill doesn't get lost. Like a lot of skills, a lot of things get lost because it just doesn't become important enough. Like basket weaving, that used to be something that was very important, and it was a skill that lace making. These things, however trivial they might seem,
Yeah,
they
die
have a
out.
huge
Yeah.
cultural impact. Yeah,
And then they die out then because obviously things
I mean,
change.
Belgium used
But
to be
yeah,
known for its lace. Now it's known for chocolate and bad politics. But it's. I know things evolve and things change, and that the things don't stay the same.
but that
when you're
doesn't mean
talking
that the
about
writing and
on the list,
creative talent completely goes to shit. Like, you know what I mean? You've got to maintain some sort of fucking standard.
once you lose it, you don't. It's not easy to get back. I mean, thank God we still have, all these wonderful films of yore, from ages gone by, which anyone with a brain can watch and go, I wonder how they did that, or that was really, and looking, at what's currently available and going, well, why can't we go back to doing that, and then maybe reworking out how to achieve that again. But those skill sets, you have to have a certain mindset, which is one, I mean, if you look at Blade Runner, for example, the set designs, the model designs, the in-camera effects, all these things that were pioneered, the films like Tron, how they instigated new technology to try and bring about CGI way ahead of its time. And you have to have that desire and thirst for pushing boundaries. And I don't think, because the age of CGI, now that we have it, is so much easier to do. I mean, it doesn't look great because they don't pay their artists enough and they don't give them enough time or hire enough of them to do the job properly because they're churning these things out so fast. But I think it's now become more of a mouse pushing exercise, rather than thinking very carefully about how you're going to light a real physical object in camera with a matte cut out or screenshot at the back, or or projections, and all this kind of stuff. It's a lost art. If you look at how they made Star Wars back in the 1970s to how they make Star Wars now, and it's lost that magic. You've got more magic than ever available to you, but the actual impetus to push what that can do seems very stifled. Like the technology is more advanced than the ability to actually use it effectively.
Well, it becomes a crutch for bad writing. It
really
Avatar
does.
is
It does. It covers up the bad writing.
Avatar exists because it has amazing special effects, and it covers up the fact that it's absolutely appalling on the script level. But it looks lovely, so it exists. I think a part of the problem is that it's an incredibly ossified industry. If you look at when the major film studios in America were founded, you're looking sort of the turn of the 1900s. So you've got Universal, which I think was like the 1920s. Warner Brothers, was that 1912? Disney's been around for, roughly speaking, as long. It's unusual in any industry for a big company of this type to maintain its monopoly position or its cartel position for anything like as long as we've seen. And it's very hard for new studios to break in because it's such an incredibly strict environment in terms of they have the initial sort of plant resource anyway. It's got a big name, big studio, big investment capacity. It can funnel money into the kind of production that people are used to seeing, etc., etc. But ordinarily, if you look at any other industry, take cameras, for example, Kodak, well, Fuji was huge. But Fuji took over from an American company which had a monopoly position for only about 20 years, and then Fuji goes away and Kodak comes in. But these monopolies tend to last 20 years at most, not almost, 100 in the case of Universal Studios now, I think. That's not usual. And it is very difficult to break that up because there are so many rules and restrictions around how you enter that industry that it becomes effectively gatekept by the existing studios. I'm doing video game work at the moment, and it's been interesting to see some of like the trades union rules around how game production is handled in the United States. If you want to be a voice actor, for example, trade unions in the United States, you have to be a member of the trade union even to be a voice actor, and you can't play more than, I think, is it 3 parts in any given production. Like, there's so many different rules and restrictions around acting, what you have to be a member of. You can't be like a director unless you're part of this guild. You can't be a writer unless you're part of this union. You can't break that up very easily because it's such an old and established, effectively a cartel. That's part of the reason, though, that you have the problem we're in now, because in any other industry, when the cartel isn't quite as strong, if you start getting the cartel churning out substandard products, people will go somewhere else because a new competitor will arise and it will take all of the money away, and then it will rise in its place and it would become the new Universal Studios. But if you've got an incredibly restrictive and baked-in regulatory environment, it's hard for any studio to emerge and to beat Universal at what Universal is doing, as opposed to be bought up immediately by Universal and then just subsumed into the culture of sort of corporate decay that's created the problem to begin with. You see some changes.
It's a hostage.
In the sense,
it's a hostage situation.
It is a hostage situation. There have been some changes. The rise of Disney and Amazon in particular, and their ability to create their own studios, but also to buy up older studios. MGM was, of course, an incredibly old and venerable institution. That I think Amazon now owns MGM, doesn't it? Or it certainly owns the distribution rights. Amazon is buying up older failing studios, but you're still getting the problem of corporate ossification. It's still, you're being bought into the stultifying culture of an established institution. You're not getting the emergence of very new, very successful, nimble and light-footed organizations that should emerge to replace them and thereby improve product again. So unless, I think that changes, unless there's a way of breaking up studios or breaking up the regulatory system that allows them to sustain themselves, I just don't really see how it ends at this stage. It will just continue to get worse and worse and worse until they run out of money.
Yeah, it's entropy. It's run its natural course, perhaps, and maybe certain old paradigms have to die in order for something new to arise, and maybe that is the technology frontier, which as I said earlier, that the ability to imagine your own film and cast it with whoever you want will be in the hands of each and every single human being with a computer. They can just there it is. Whether or not that's a good thing, that's another discussion. But ultimately, with the advent of technology, gamers and artificial intelligence and VR and all this stuff, it's inevitable. And Hollywood, as I said, is like trying to mobilize the Russian army in World War One. It's very slow. And
they're always slow to adapt.
When Napster turned up, it was on its last legs until they managed to use what power they had to shut it down, and then eventually slowly adopt to MP3 technology. So maybe that will be something that Hollywood has to do, is to accept that the new filmmakers in the future will be the audience themselves, and maybe the studios will have to learn to accommodate that in some way, perhaps, to stay alive. And
but we already see when fans do put their heart and soul into fan projects, then you have big companies then flexing their power and then having those fan projects either killed dead in the water or there's some legal action.
Well, you won't need to. I mean, obviously there will always be fan films or fans who want to make films that are of beloved franchises, whatever. But also there will be people who will be able to use that technology to actually bring into reality their own ideas. I mean, there's a book in everybody, and I think there's
in most cases that's where it should stay, as the saying continues. But the problem though with that is that the moment you get any kind of innovation like that, you will see, and as I think it's just pointed out, you will see the immense regulatory apparatus mobilized against whatever the emergent new technology happens to be.
Like they did with Napster.
Yeah. The one I've got in mind at the moment, actually, someone was working for years and years and years doing a proper, complete HD remake of Knights of the Old Republic, completely fan-led. They've been going on it for about 10 years. and then Disney, or is it Lucas? Is Lucas Games in Disney now? I think it is. They announced that they're doing their own one, and so immediately they tell the people who've been working for 10 years on this project, you're legally not allowed to continue, and we will sue you into oblivion if you do. Now,
So like Axanar with Star
they're within
Trek,
the rights to do that. And then, of course, they announced that they're delaying their own remake anyway, so we might not ever see that. So they've just killed a project without replacing it. But that's the kind of thing that you will see. You might get technology that allows people, as you say, to create their own films on their own laptops, just plug their brain into a computer and then you can imagine whatever you want to imagine, it becomes a film. Then you will get regulations restricting the private use of that technology, or if you want to display it anywhere, like in a theater, just watch and wait till you see that you have to have a franchise to show a film in a cinema. So you wouldn't be able to show that film to anybody else anyway. It will be an immensely corporatized process. Eventually, yeah, it probably will overthrow the ancien regime, but there's a lot of power and tools available to the ancien regime, which is why it is the ancien regime, and it's why it is so ancien, if that's a word.
Well,
it's why it's been going for such a long time.
That depends on, again, Hollywood being quick enough to get the legislation on their side. So we all know that the law is incredibly slow when it comes to technology and computers and laws surrounding content in that regard. So yeah, I can see that there will be. This could also cause more, bringing together state and corporate power, which is not something we should really be angling for. But again, how quick will it be? I mean, we saw with Napster how they crushed that, but then it didn't stop the technology from being used. And yes, eventually the music industry caught up with it, and then we had streaming with Apple Music and Amazon Music and so on and so forth, and people will pay a subscription for that. So I guess however long that model goes on for, that will be something that you would need. Probably in the future, it'll be something like a bloody credit score before you can make a movie using AI or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we can sit here and put our futurist hats on for as long as we can talk about it. But ultimately, for things to improve, they need challenging, and the only way I think
but if that happens, but this is what will happen. Look, if fans start doing their own productions and they start being great, right, and we've already seen that some are, right, but if this keeps continuing and continues to be a trend, they'll panic and they'll flex their muscles and they'll just kill them dead because they want to be the only source of entertainment. Remember, they've already told us over these last few years, right? We've had it in the Doctor Who fandom, you had it in Star Trek fandom, and you've had it in the Star Wars fandom. We've been told they will make these franchises as they see fit, and they're just ignoring us. They don't care what we think or what we have to say. They will make them the way they see fit. Fans, I do believe fans do need to continue, but they're going to flex and they're going to take down a lot of people before.
Yeah, but you might be able to make your own movie in your own way, and then I'm just talking in terms of generations in the future. More savvy than I would ever be, but who would be able to make their own movies and share them, cost free, whatever, with encrypted technology that like Bitcoin's blockchain technology, whatever. They can share these things without any sort of oversight, unless of course they bring about all these laws on the internet, which is probably also inevitable. But I mean, there are always ways. People always find ways. There's always ways around these things, and the more technology advances, the more savvy the people are. They're quicker to move as individuals than corporations are, or the law. So
yeah, but the corporations have one thing that fans won't have: plenty of money, and as long as they've got the money, they'll be able to.
Well, they only have money if they're making money. If they're going to make bad product and people aren't buying it anymore, they won't have as much money. So it swings and roundabouts. Look,
Sorry, you have to put this comment up because this comment for the win. Jesus Christ.
That's brilliant.
Sorry, but that is so funny.
Not Brian.
Oh,
you are a class act, sir.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, look,
all my characters will be ginger.
I do love when fans out there show their creative ability. We've got a lot of creative fans in Doctor Who, as we know, and we've seen it with the Star Trek fans as well. And the Star Wars fans, yeah, they're a militant bunch, but they know what they're talking about, and you know, they've got their own fan stuff going on as well, and it's pretty cool, I have to say. But I don't know. I don't know.
It's adapt or die, isn't it? You know, adapt or die.
Yeah,
corporations need to adapt, or they're gonna just disappear like dinosaurs. You know, that it really does depend on whether or not they are willing to embrace the technology and the democratization of content. I mean, look at YouTube. You know, I mean, it's a corporate platform, but you know, with all its flaws and faults and everything, you still have quite a good selection, diverse selection of opinions and content, some more successful than others. So, you know, maybe that is a model that...
Yeah, well, if you toe the line and you don't deliberately try to break the rules, you will have it pretty easy enough on YouTube. Yet they're a pain in the ass, and I agree with you, they are. I think they are hindering the content creator. I think I think they do favor more the big commercial accounts and stuff like that, and they have their favorite YouTubers. They make it clear that they have certain YouTubers that they push. But I'm not saying toe the line as such, but you know, you can still get your opinion across. You know what I mean? You don't have to break rules by doing it, or to make a point and then to scream and bitch about.
Well, the rules seem rather arbitrary and
play the victim.
Not very well
mentality.
Yeah, but the rules aren't very clear in many ways.
No, they never are though. They never have
arbitrary for some and enforced for others.
Fucking changing them every month, for fuck's sake. They get changed every month, man. I get a bleeding notification in the email every time we change shit.
It's the fact that people are unfairly targeted when others get away with doing the exact same thing that you're doing. Like there's, you know, someone who will use 5 hours of Doctor Who clips from the BBC and
I can't even use 45 seconds.
But they have pronouns, so you know it's so clear to anyone who's actually paying attention that there is a two-tier system going on here. Having opaque rules that don't apply to everyone doesn't really bode well. So I think you really need a very clear, transparent set of rules that applies to everyone equally. Everyone can agree on that you enter into when you agree to use their platform, and that's fine. Unfortunately, that's just not where we're at.
No.
That really does need a change. And you know, I was hoping with Elon Musk that Twitter would be changed, but I found myself having a poll that I put up on my profile. First day it got a few votes. Second day it got more votes. Third day I think I had like 200 votes in a day, and then the next day it went down to 5, and then it stopped. It froze. I checked if I was shadow banned. I was still shadow banned. My poll had been frozen. It sounds rude, but it's not that kind of poll.
A Twitter poll. Just say Twitter poll.
A Twitter poll. Twitter poll was frozen. I had 2 people do a check for me. They voted in the poll. Both ended up with the result with my result +1. But how can you have 2 people with the same vote number? You know, they both voted, so it should have gone up 2, but it was, you know, gone up 1 for each of them, the same number. That's all because I criticized Stonewall.
Yeah, you
Now
can't
that's
criticize
quite
Stonewall.
worrying.
Yeah,
Interestingly enough, because I
you should know better as a gay man not
ah
to bash
no,
Stonewall.
bad me, bad
Stonewall,
game,
fight
bad
for
game,
you,
bad game.
Lee. They
Yeah,
defend
no,
your
they don't.
right. Yeah, they don't.
Yeah,
They're a
they
bunch of
might have done
assholes.
once,
Of
but
course, I was being sarcastic there for anybody out there that doesn't know this
but
channel.
I did copy the charity commission into my poll, and any updates that were done in that, it did draw their attention that after the poll had closed and the result hadn't changed at all for 3 days, I posted and pinned to my profile still there saying that my Twitter poll had been tampered with under Elon Musk's truth and freedom of speech platform.
Yeah.
And they actually did comment to me to send them an email. So I will be doing that. But it doesn't inspire confidence.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think of Elon Musk's Twitter? I mean, I remember when the announcement was made and we were all, including myself, I was actually excited about it. I thought, right, maybe he can actually do this. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He had a bit of a rocky start, and I thought, he's starting to show off now. It's kind of annoying me a little bit, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But
did you see he post? He changed his name to Mr. Tweet,
and he can't
and he
change it
said
back
Twitter
now.
won't allow him to change it back again.
Yeah, but that's what he gets for showing off. But Ben, I want to ask you, what do you think of Elon Musk's Twitter? Because I finally have copped on. I've copped on pretty quick, actually, and my opinion on it is this: he's no better than the rest of all the billionaires out there. He talks a good game when it comes to Twitter, but I don't think he's going to deliver personally. I think he's took on too much. The fact that he's rehired some of the old Twitter people, I think they're sabotaging him actually within the company. I think they're in there and they're actually sabotaging the site. So I don't think Twitter is going to. I will actually say personally that I've seen Twitter get worse. People will argue against that, but I believe the platform has gotten worse. But what's your opinion on Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter?
Just going to quickly say as well, he wants people arguing on Twitter. It makes money, but anyway, that's it.
Well, that is true. I don't know. I'd say that it's got worse, but I was always slightly cool on the idea that he was going to be, as he first described himself anyway, the free speech absolutist. I mean, Elon Musk doesn't actually understand the entailments of that position, and he never has. So when he says, I'm a free speech absolutist, and then follows it up a week later by saying, I consider free speech to be as defined by the states in which Twitter operates in a bit to appease the European Union, because the European Union was pressuring him. That's a qualitatively different statement. And then when he does decisions on Twitter, like readmitting Donald Trump on the basis that free speech is vox populi vox dei, that's the opposite of free speech. I mean, that's the thing that killed Socrates. So I don't think he understands the concept. I don't think he's particularly interested in getting rid of the tools that allowed suppression to exist in the first place. The best you could ever have hoped for is that the tools were going to be used by somebody you happen to agree with, as opposed to by somebody that you don't agree with, or more importantly, by someone who agrees with you, as opposed to someone who doesn't agree with you. That's an improvement of a kind. I don't think it's as good as lots of his fans were hoping it was going to be. He's obviously, I think, overstretched as well. I mean, you can't be the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter,
and Twitter,
company.
And the list goes on and on and on. And give each and every one of those your full and undivided attention. He bought it, of course, with the financial backing of certain state governments, which are very much not in favor of his supposed commitment to free speech. I don't think anyone would accuse the Saudi Arabians of taking too lax an attitude toward freedom of speech and expression. So the best that could have been hoped for was that it would improve mildly, or the tools would be used not to persecute the people they have been persecuting. I think that's generally been true. There's been some stuff more recently in the last couple of weeks with certain accounts of people who know Elon Musk. I won't name them because apparently that gets you in trouble.
It does. This particular female out there is reporting, right? There's a public video on YouTube. This is how it all started. We can't mention names because Ben is right. This particular woman is going around and she's striking everything, and she's pals with Elon Musk, and it seems like she's using Elon Musk as a personal tool to have people censored for correctly, actually, I believe, highlighting a few inconsistencies with a story that she's been telling, and because of that story, she's kind of made herself very well known and popular because of it, and what comes with that is obviously money. So she's become very popular, and some people have been investigating and found some inconsistencies to the story that she's been telling everybody. And because people are questioning her now, she's using Elon to basically censor these people. So that's what's been going on recently on Twitter, and it's still going on today. And every day there's a new, it just keeps getting deeper and deeper, this rabbit hole. But
And that's the
every day,
problem when
yeah,
you have someone who comes in and says that they're in favor of freedom of speech, but they don't do away with the tools that were used to suppress people to begin with. Then it's just a matter of, do you trust this person not to use those same tools, even though they could? Elon Musk will use them differently than the previous regime did, but the tools still exist. And there's the interesting point about how they're used as well. I mean, one of the things that Elon Musk, I think, has been trying to persuade people of is that Twitter is now much more transparent about things than it used to be. But what he's done to prove that is just to give us transparency about the way the previous owners ran the company. He's not actually made the existing processes any more transparent, as far as I can see, than the previous owners did.
exactly.
So you can say, well, he's revealed that the last owners shadow banned XYZ accounts. Fine. We still don't have publicly available information about whether or not Twitter is still shadow banning people to this day. He's already said that in theory that's allowed. Freedom of speech isn't freedom of reach. So we know the tools still exist and they're probably still being used, but we don't know how they're being used. The only real way out of this, and it's not even a way out because it's almost utopian to suggest it will ever happen, but the problem at the moment with every big tech company, and it goes for Facebook, it goes for Google, it goes for YouTube, any big tech company at the moment, is that the ultimate arbiter of what's permissible and what is impermissible is terms of service, and terms of service is interpreted by the people in charge. It's incredibly opaque. You have no fundamental rights on the internet as you do in any other public sphere and domain. So you don't know what the rules will be or how they'll be interpreted at any given time. Elon Musk showed us how Twitter bent its own terms of service to justify banning Donald Trump in the first place.
Yeah.
It was making recourse to terms of service to justify that decision. Ideally, eventually, some kind of framework happens, some kind of digital bill of rights emerges that takes the impetus away from terms of service and toward a universally understood and transparent process for mediating online conversation. I don't think that will ever happen because the companies have a vested interest in ensuring that it doesn't. But that would be a nice thing to see, to say the least.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's interesting what's going on right now. I mean, is he? I mean, he's obviously personally not responsible, but what's going on right now? But you are right; those tools. If and you're right, he also thinks by reinstating certain accounts as well that's projecting that he's more. He's more into free speech. But as you said, if those tools are
It's only
still
the big
there
accounts.
and they're still,
It's only the
and
big
they're,
accounts.
well, of course, yeah, because
He's
you're still banned.
He's still got my old account banned for saying gay men don't do vagina. Yeah, he's given the Taliban a blue check mark. I mean, it blows my mind. It's all about how many followers you have. Ultimately, I think that's what it really boils down to. Someone like my old account, which had I think 3,000 followers, it's nothing. So it doesn't register, and you can at him all you like. You're not going to get anywhere. It's a very two-tier system again. It's very much a battle of popularity, a battle of big names getting names in certain headlines. Donald Trump was just a PR exercise, and I just think if you're going to talk about a platform for truth and why then would someone who has a following of 3,000 people be a threat to that compared to, say, the Taliban? It just doesn't add up. It's all newspeak.
It is. I mean, it's also depressingly procedural. I mean, the reason that a 3,000 follower account can get banned is because the processes to ban them exist. In other words, if you get mass reported, Twitter will still have an automated system that places a ban on that account. And unless you're big enough to have a following which will enact an equivalent pressure group to get you unbanned, you won't be, probably, because there's no incentive even for them to take a look at the case.
No.
And as long as this is the case, as long as the process for banning accounts is automated, it's vulnerable to mass flagging campaigns, and it's very difficult to get proper redress against those kinds of campaigns. I mean, you see it to a lesser extent, but still there on YouTube as well. Certain YouTube channels will be mass flagged, and YouTube systems kick in automatically. And unless you're lucky enough to have a large fan base, you probably won't get your channel back. That empowers these kind of sub-Stalinist little shit weasels to make use of the power that they've been given by these systems.
Yeah.
I don't think the systems were designed to give them this amount of power. I just don't think enough care and attention was paid into the creating of the systems to begin with.
Well,
Melvin in the chat
ended
said
up
he
working
thinks
for
Elon, he thinks Musk is legit, but I think he's also naive. I'd agree. I think his heart is in the right place, but as Ben said, he doesn't understand when it comes to a social media platform like Twitter, saying it's going to be more transparent and freedom of speech is going to be respected. You can't make that promise unless, basically, for that to come true, he'd have to tear the whole of Twitter down and start from scratch and bring in people that have different views, points of views on different topic. That's how you'd have to do it to get a truly transparent social media platform, but that'll never happen. So we just have to make do with what we have. I do think his heart's in the right place, but what's annoying me about him recently is the fact he's showing off. Right? I get it. He does work hard, as Ben says. He is like, he does go from place to place, and he is actually doing stuff. He's not sitting around. But I'd rather him stop showing off in front of all these supporters and actually get in there at the heart of Twitter and do the things that he said he was going to do. I mean, Lee. I probably already know the answer to this, but Lee, I mean, your experience since Elon has taken over Twitter since you've come back, would you say it's worse than it was before?
I wouldn't say it's worse. I mean, in terms of being allowed to be gender critical, for example, it's a lot more freeing to some degree. But as I say,
you still have to be careful how you word things, though, don't you?
Well, yeah, but I think ultimately, as Lord said, you don't have the freedom of reach. If they can suppress your message or your tweets to anybody, no one can see them. So what's the bloody point? Why would you spend hours in a day on Twitter typing out words, pearls of wisdom, as I usually do, only for no one to really see it? I mean, the incentive really isn't to engage. How is that as a business model? It is very Stalinist. It's no different in that respect. I just find it's the same kind of demoralizing acts. You've got people working against the narrative in his own company. I don't know if he has a separate office in London or whatever that he hasn't actually bothered to visit and get rid of people there.
Well, he's closed down the one in Dublin, so the one in Dublin's closing down. I think he was closing down. I think Twitter, he's closing down some of the offices anyway I think the main
Well,
office as
I
well.
wish you'd do
Sure.
the UK one. I wish you'd shot
That
that one
is
down because
one of the lesser stated mitigations is that
Mm.
much of what Elon Musk has done and what much of the attention has been focused on what he's done to reform its corporate practice and culture in the United States. But Twitter has an equivalently powerful corporate culture and practice in any number of its territories. So the story, I think it was last week, that Twitter in India was taking down BBC documentaries that were critical of Narendra Modi's government at the behest of the government. Caused some stink because people looked at it and they said, well, I thought, Elon, that you'd stop that. And Elon Musk's response, which I think was probably fair, is that, I don't have time to fix everything all in one go whilst also being CEO of so many other companies. The fact is that any change in corporate culture enacted in San Francisco isn't necessarily going to be replicated in New Delhi. And it will take time for that to filter across. I don't know exactly what the relationship between the UK office and the American office is, but I imagine something similar is at play there. He's reforming its American headquarters because that's where he's focused, that's where his mind is. There's still going to be problems in the UK and in other territories. The one thing that I think that is an unambiguous good and that does have far-reaching implications is that in sacking, 70% of staff and keeping the thing going, he's effectively exploded this nice little bubble in the tech sector, which says that you can hire uncounted numbers of HR department women. Invariably, it is women as well who staff HR departments. And that these will somehow add to your productivity and grow your revenue. In fact, the opposite's the case. None of these people need to be there. They don't work. Most of them don't even have jobs. They're just paid to sit around and drink coffee and then talk about how difficult their life
wine
is.
on tap.
And it's not coincidental that Elon Musk does this and 70% of the staff go and Twitter still is fine. And then you get, 2-3 months later, Meta announces it's laying off 10,000 staff. Google announces it's probably going to lay off 15 to 20,000 staff. And these will all be the meddling HR department whiners. And it will be nice to see these people go out into the real world and have to try and find a job because they have no qualification, skills, or experience. And hopefully they'll end up on the dole for a very long time.
That's it. No, you're right, man. For all the shit they put us through, absolutely all the censorship, they deserve it. Let them go on the dole queue. They'll see what it's like for some people out there having
authoritarians.
These people, and he is right though. You ever see videos of Google headquarters or Twitter and all that? They're all standing around, man.
Did you see that one?
He's right.
Did you see that one? And then she did a whole video of her typical day, which was effectively doing bugger all. And then the second one she did, and then at the end it ended with her going, "And today I was laid off."
Rightly so, because you did fuck all. You shouldn't be getting paid for not doing that. And you know what I mean? You either contribute to society and wider civilization, or just bloody go away. Simple as that. End of story. Sick of all of these lazy bastards. It's about time that they're all kicked out in their ear and they actually make to go and look for a proper bleeding job. Or as Ben said, a lot of them are screwed because they don't have any qualifications or skills of note to actually get them through this life. Life is tough. You know that line in Rocky Balboa, life will beat you down. No matter how many times it beats you down, you have to get the will to start. That's what it's all about, man. These people wouldn't know a hard day's work in their life. They've never done a hard day's work in their life, right? I actually seen a video of someone. She worked in an office for years or something. She gave up her office job because she wanted to do something different. So she went and she got a job at McDonald's. Now, personally, I wouldn't go from an office to McDonald's, but that's what she did. She gave up after 2 hours. It was too hard for her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she was crying, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was crying her eyes out, giving out because it was too hard. You were flipping fucking burgers. I worked in McDonald's, part of my work experience, right? It's not fucking hard, right? Yeah, you're on your feet a lot, but you're flipping fucking burgers. And you complain it's too hard and you're whinging, you're crying about how society's not fair.
God, can you imagine her working on an oil rig or something? Bloody hell.
Fuck off, man. You wouldn't trust those fuckers on an oil rig. Man, right? You'll have Greta Thunberg coming jumping out. Oil's bad. Fuck off, you as well. Go and educate yourself, you little twat. Right. Anyway, we've only got a few minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over the stream to Ben, and Ben is going to tell us a little bit about his channel and why he's on YouTube and does what he does. And you can Also, if you want to share, if you want to shout out your social medias and stuff like that as well, you're more than welcome. And if you have any upcoming streams as well, if you want to throw that out as well. So we'll give you the last few minutes on the channel, because me and Lee have spoken quite enough. So we'll let you.
That's very kind of you. No, thank you very much.
And it's been a pleasure having you on, by the way.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, oh god, no, sales pitch. Yeah, no, your main channel is the Little Platoon. Don't have any streams coming up. I try and do videos sort of every. It varies between like once a week and once a fortnight, depending on how long it is. So the next one is probably going to be, I've got a big like 3.5 hour Avatar review, which is taking a while, but I'm hoping that will be up next weekend. So that will probably be the next thing. I have a second channel called Lost Chord, which is for like shorter little reviews and things like that. Frequently streaming over with Mr. Brown or Mr. Brown Alliance. Try and get there once a week if I can. And yeah, the channel is mostly film reviews, TV reviews, some cultural stuff, and I'll probably be moving back into politics coverage, but on a separate channel in the near-ish future. But yeah, that's me. I'm at Platoon Pod on Twitter, all one word. And is there anything I've missed? No, I think that was very concise. I think I've actually got through it in about half a minute.
So can I ask, because everybody has their own little story on why they decided to do YouTube. What's your story? What made you want to go onto this mad platform and
suffer,
do your thing?
Yeah, it's so I was a journalist before. I was at the Financial Times for a couple of years. I started just at the beginning of lockdown. And obviously being in lockdown and working from home, I for the first time in my life actually spent meaningful time on YouTube. And I think who did I come across first? It was either Mauler or The Critical Drinker I came across first. I think it was, I think The Drinker probably first, and then Mauler, and then through Mauler EFAP, and then through EFAP, everyone who's been on EFAP lost many days of my life watching EFAP and being on it as well. Rings of Power, I think I was on it for like 3 days. But I was looking at what they were doing and I thought, well, I've always written film reviews, cultural stuff anyway, and I was writing about pensions at the FT, which is not the sexiest of topics. So I wanted a little hobby. A friend of mine and I decided we'd have a go at YouTube, and it started off as sort of little political videos, very low effort stuff, just getting together and chatting, and that's basically it. And then I sort of thought, well, I'm seeing these film reviewers doing what I really like doing, and a new medium for expressing it as well, the whole video editing stuff, which I'd never done before. I'll have a go. I think it was Star Trek Discovery, which was pissing me off that time. So I thought, I'll just do a quick video on Star Trek Discovery. That proved to be way more popular than anything else we did. So I thought, well, I'll carry on doing this. And then eventually the political stuff just dropped out and my friend had to go away and do other things anyway. So I took over the channel full time. Mostly then TV media, proper video editing, sort of learning how all of that works. Through that, it sort of grew up. It went scarily quickly after sort of the first 2 months was slow, hard work. And then I did look it up. I hit 100 subscribers in December 2021, I think it was. I'd hit 10,000 6 months ago. I just passed 100,000 a week and a half ago, I think it was. And I quit the FT about 4 months ago, I think, because it was sustainable at that point. And happily, it just continues to grow and go on up. And through that, I've met the Drinker and Mauler and all these people I've been watching for a while anyway, which has been lovely. And I've met through Mr. Brown, who was kind enough to have me on in the early days. I've met Lee, and I've met Brian and all the people who go on those streams, and now I've met you as well, which is it's been a brilliant way of meeting really lovely people with many shared interests and managing to spend a good, enjoyable amount of my evenings that I could be spending just being incredibly bored. I now get to spend talking with people about pop culture, and I do it for a living. And through that, I'm writing video games as well as a result of that stuff. So it's been a manic, mad year, but it's been a good, fun one.
It sounds amazing, I have to say. Yeah, I mean, it's you know what, I agree with you. I find this platform, yes, it has its flaws. Same with Twitter, but I've met a lot of nice people from all around the world, and it's nice that we all have a shared interest in our pop culture and all the other stuff that's going on. And we can talk and debate it without falling out, because that's the problem. You talk to other strangers, and
Shut up.
you have an opinion about it. Doesn't matter, man. If you say the sky is blue, they'll argue with you that the sky is bleeding green or something. Even if the evidence and the facts are right in front of them, they'll argue that right down until the last minute that the sky is green, even though it's blue. That's how pathetic things have gotten. I just don't know how we got here. I really don't, because I did not see this coming. I didn't see this coming. I grew up in the 80s, right? Obviously, my teenage years in the 90s. They're the two best decades for me. Even the early 2000s were actually a little bit decent, but I've always said it. For me personally, the whole world changed after 9/11. That's when I think it was the beginning of the end. That's where I believe it changed, and it hasn't been the same since. The world's a lot colder. But yeah, as I said, I've got to meet it's not all that bad, because I've got to meet some wonderful people, and it is a great platform to meet new people and stuff, and it is fascinating. I love it. I wouldn't give this up. I know I've got a tiny channel, but I make my own little mark in my little corner of it, and
It's
people
yours.
still watch me well, and people still watch me. I haven't bored everybody after 5 years, so there you go. Of course, I did stifle myself over the last 5 years because I stuck with the one topic. Obviously, we're branching out now. I've been threatening to branch out for years. We've eventually done it now. And I'm enjoying it, because obviously Doctor Who is not the only thing that I love. There's other stuff I love. I'm a huge science fiction fan, and obviously that's in a bit of a state. And I do like playing my video games as well. The gaming industry is gone to crap as well. It's just, I don't know how we got here. If someone could explain how we got here, like we had the decades that we had, and then this,
someone switched on CERN. It's all gone wrong.
Someone switched on bloody something. I can tell you that, because we all woke up and the world was completely a different place.
Tuned in and dropped out. I don't know.
That's it. Well, Lee, go on, because we're going to finish up in 4 minutes. So you do your shout outs as well.
Sure. Well, you can maybe follow me on Twitter. I don't know, because, maybe I'm shadow banned. Who knows? But it's at The Problem Being. You can also, it's just so fucking, I hate it.
I know.
You can find me on Instagram, which I'm barely using until now. I'm back on Twitter, but that's at Aldred Audio Visual. Same as my YouTube channel, which is now just over 500. I think it's at 500 subscribers, which is strange because I haven't uploaded anything in ages. So I need to do more with that.
You keep saying that every week, man.
I know. It's winter. I don't operate very well in the cold.
One day he'll come on. One Friday he'll be here, and he'll say that, and then we'll eventually get a video on Lee's channel.
Yeah. It will happen.
Eventually.
It will happen.
Yeah.
I've done one episode of an audio drama of Doctor Who with the first Doctor.
Is that still going?
Yeah, but I had to put it on hold. I reached a technical limit because I'm mixing it in binaural surround, so it's something I haven't done before, and it's not behaving quite as it should. So there's a lot to iron out. But that's by and by. Also, I'll be on Mr. Brown Alliance's channel on Sunday, probably with the little platoon as well, if he's about. And obviously, you'll find me on here some point when we do something at some point with Doctor Who.
Yeah, the schedule will be look. The schedule will be coming out next week for definite. I've already got my co-host for the other stream that we're doing, so the schedule will be up next week, and everybody will know what streams are on and when we're doing them. Obviously, the classic Who Zone and the new Who Zone will return as well. along with the Tarda Zone Talks. And of course, every Friday we'll be here, and hopefully we'll have Chris with us next week. But I have to say, the little platoon was fantastic. So maybe we'll just say, Chris, go ahead. You can take your Friday nights off. I'm only messing. You killed me for saying that. I'm only messing. But Chris, he got called in for a double shift. He told me earlier today, and it was, he sounded good because he actually wanted to be on tonight. But, you can't ignore work when the boss calls you in. You've got to go in. So he's done a double shift. But I want to thank Ben for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think a couple of the people in the chat there sub to your channel as well. I will do it after this stream as well. Also, and
should.
I think PD has put your links in the chat there along with Liz. That's fantastic. And you can catch me on Twitter and Instagram. Well, I don't really use Instagram, but every time I go on, someone's bitching and moaning at me because of me tweets or something. It's just ridiculous. It's gone ridiculous now, man. I can't even talk about anything, man. Right? I open my mouth about something and someone is sending me a message. You're a horrible human being. Okay, fair enough. But you know what you can do? There's a thing called a block button or a mute button. Just bloody use it, for God's sake. Right? Because I ain't blocking yous, because that's what you want, because you take it as a bit of a victory. Yay! Null Zone blocked me, as if it's some achievement. Jesus Christ, cop onto yourselves. Right, good night, folks. We'll see you soon. Have a good weekend, and stay safe and look after yourselves, because the world's crazy out there right now. But we'll be back to keep you entertained as usual. So we'll leave it there. Say good night, lads.
Bye-bye.
Good night, lads.
Oh, Lee always does that. Good night, folks. Have a good one. See yous. Good night.
Bye.